Yeah, well, well, and the thing is that it's a lot easier to have a sense of humor when you're not feeling three quarters dead.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, my health is back. I'm in pretty good shape again, and so it's a lot easier to be sharp as well and to pay attention to what's going on, but also to to have a bit of a lighter touch. And I've always struggled with that with the material I deal with because it's so serious. I mean, totalitarianism and atrocity is what I've been studying for 30 years, and it doesn't really get any darker than that. But I do know that even despite the fact that what I study is very dark, and I suppose some of the things I talk about is very dark too, that the humor is just unbelievably necessary. And I think I was able to keep a lighter touch in that interview and to laugh a little bit, especially at the absurdity of it, because it just became, well, I think the reason that it went viral is because the interview became its own parody.
Yeah.
Like she could have, what should have happened likely was that she should have gone after me like, I thought afterwards, I thought that was like being mauled by 20 miniature pit bulls. And
Yeah.
I was sure that Channel 4 was going to edit that and cut it up so that I would look like an absolute monster. And I guess they did that to some degree with regards to what they broadcast and also what they put on their Facebook page. But they put the whole interview up on YouTube, which I actually think, you could say, well, more power to them, and fair enough. But I actually think they did that out of straight naivety. I don't think they had any idea whatsoever what that interview actually looked like to the outside world. And I think they were shell shocked by the response. I really believe that. I have some inside information from Channel 4, and I've been following people's reaction to it. Like, I invited Cathy Newman to do another interview, because I threw a backdoor channel. And I said, look, like, why don't we basically make this right instead of it ending this way, because you've taken a lot of flack for this. Why don't we actually sit down and have a talk, and then that'll work out fine? And she said something like, well, I need to let this die down and rethink it, but I don't understand what all the fuss is about. I thought the interview went very well. It's like, well,
Oh, I think whoever's in charge of their YouTube account, probably not a big Cathy Newman fan. And
She doesn't have
upload.
access to YouTube.
That's fascinating. So she didn't take you up on it. I mean, yeah, I think there is some naivete there, but it's interesting that they uploaded that in entirety. Well, we had that with Sky News. Remember that? Not sure. You were there one time, and there were some producers there who didn't like one of their hosts, but they brought me on, and you could tell that's how I got my gig at Fox News, and that's how I got my spots at CNN. I was a young kid, was just a comedian. I didn't even have the show back then. It was just kind of a lamb for the slaughter, and I did all right. It's like they sit me in front of Alan Combs and I did okay, and then they kept bringing me back. I don't think they always necessarily expect it. And like you said, they're out of touch. She may have thought that she did really well in that interview. One thing that I often do, and I think we've talked about this, to prepare for debates, to prepare for conversations, or even just to see kind of where I stack up against great thinkers, and you would be certainly today's sort of great thinker, Mount Rushmore, I would say, is the first time I watch an interview, I'll watch the Cathy Newman portion and pause it before I hear your response, and I respond as though it's in real time. I'll do this with Bill Maher. I'll do it with, I don't know, Don Lemon. I'll do it with Cathy Newman just to see how I would respond, so it's as close to a live simulation as possible. One thing that you handled superbly was very different. I noticed from where I took this, when she said, well, hold on a second, I'm talking about the transgender law in Canada. She said, why does your freedom of speech trump their right to not be offended? And I just paused it, and my answer was, there is no right to not be offended. But then I hit
well, yes.
play, and yours was actually, I thought, ooh, this might play against him. I thought it was a little too intellectual, but it actually drew her into a firefight to where you ultimately said, gotcha. You said, well, think about it. You need to have the right to be offensive because you need to have the right to dig and to offend me. And that's absolutely something you should be doing. And you turned it in a personal analogy and telling her, giving her more free reign. And I think she was caught off guard by that. That was handled really well.
Well, she was, because the thing is, it was so patently obvious by that point that she was doing everything she possibly could to make me uncomfortable. She knew it, I knew it, the viewers knew it. There was no doubt about it. And it was easy just to point to that and then to say, well, perhaps that's what you should be doing. At least you certainly have the right to do that.
Right.
But that offense argument, like we can break that down a little bit because that's worthwhile. It's like, okay, you don't have the right to say anything that offends someone else. It hurts their feelings. Okay, what if you're talking to 1,000 people? You don't have the right to say anything that's going to offend any one of those 1,000 people, which basically means you do not have the right to say anything at all, because in a group of 1,000 people, virtually anything you say will be regarded as offensive by at least one person, even if it's merely a consequence of the fact that they're misinterpreting you. And so really the right, the absence of the right to offend is absence of the right to speak at all.
Right.
And that just seems so self-evident. All you have to do is think about it. And if it's not 1,000 people, what if you're Cathy Newman and you're talking to 1 million people? Like, she's offending people nonstop.